And we are live. Down here at the pawn shop. It's the only way to shop down here at the pawn shop. Waiting on Rockfin. Rockfin any minute. Rumble is good. Rockfin waiting on you. What is happening, Rockfin? Let's double check something. Huh? Rockfin is here. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, Rockfin, I'm waiting on you. We'll see if you decide to make an appearance. Maybe. Maybe not. Rockfin? Let me refresh. Down here at the pawn shop. It's the only way to shop. Down here at the pawn shop. What's going on with Rockfin, man? All right, Rockfin, you kind of holding me up a little bit. Oh, well, we'll see if we can come back to it. Anywho, time to go. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Hello. Happy Thursday and welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter. Rockfin apparently is having issues. So for whatever reason, I'm not able to stream over to Rockfin. Their site's all messed up right now. I can't even go to the homepage. So sorry for those of you that are usually on Rockfin. So that really sucks. Anywho, welcome back, guys. Happy Thursday. I hope you've had a great week so far. We have some interesting stories to discuss tonight, but I want to go ahead and start out by saying hello to everyone in the chat. And yes, we do have a poll. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and answer that poll for me. That'll be important towards the end of tonight's show. Shout out to Dr. Nick says, hi, everybody. Sup? Greetings, Brother Daniel says, go west to a green new frontier. Shout out to Cup of Joy, who's a Sabby member, says, Cornel, love, drown out the neo-lib noise. Yeah, we have a story tonight. They're already doing it. They're already putting out the hit pieces. Shout out to Hannah G says they're coming after Cornel. What's up, Monarch? Cornel West, no question about that. No capitalist grifts having to do with crypto, CBDCs, Israel, etc. Shout out to Venti Cafe. Wow, someone actually voted Biden in that poll. I hope they're just trolling. Haven't looked at it yet. Greetings, Karen says, hi, Dr. Nick. What's up, whoever says, what's up, comrades? Shout out to Java the Cat. Hi, Sabby. Super weird thing happened today. About 60 other people and I waited about 2 hours for Bad Faith to premiere a vid debunking RFK Jr.'s stance on Israel. There's a part 2 to this, sorry. No clip ever showed, and eventually said video was deleted by uploader. I don't know. Maybe there was an issue with the vid. I don't know, because I don't do recordings. For most part, I usually don't do recordings. I do live streams, but maybe there was an issue like uploading the video or something like that. I don't know. But that's interesting. Shout out to Mastermind Hour says somebody voted for Biden. Bad cookies must be here. What's up, Dwayne, who's a Sabby member, says, hola, mi amigos. Shout out to Larez says, hi, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Cornel has the best policies by far. Smash the like. BJG interview with Marianne Williamson was cringe. We're going to talk about two parts of that interview tonight. What's up? Gamer for Life says hello. Shout out to Buds Not Bombs says, I think that's the piece or Star Trek thing. Oh, let's rock on. Rock on and aliens. Greetings, Dabby Dab says, whoop, whoop. How's it going, Sabby fam? Don't forget to show that like button some love. That's right, guys. Smash the like button for me there. What's going on? Desert Mantis says, Marianne is neck and neck with Sleepy Joe. What's up, Steve? Hello, wonderful people. Shout out to Ravina, who's a Sabby member, says hello to Dwayne, Gamer, and whoever. What's going on? Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, hi, Thursday peeps. Greetings, Mark says, we are win-win with Cornel. Even if he loses, the working class will finally get the movement it needs. Greetings, Anthony sends a smiley face. Shout out to Deneen says, we need a none of the above on the poll. Yeah, I can only put 4 options with the polls, unfortunately. That's usually why I don't have that as an option. Shout out to Randy says, evening to Gamer and to Sabby comrades. Shout out to Eric says, RIP Brownie Door. Oh no. The puppy? Maybe the puppy. I'll have to check. And shout out to my comrade JB says, hello, everyone. Forehead kisses. Greetings, Marcel says, greetings from Canada, internet people. And shout out to Nisi says, we up in here. Yes, we are. And it's time to go ahead and get started. We're going to dive right in. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies and members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Mark Quinteros. Thank you. Whoop, whoop. Whoopity whoop. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what are we discussing tonight? A pretty interesting lineup here. It was kind of tough choosing stories, to be honest with you. There were a couple I was like, oh, maybe I have to save that one for Friday. Tonight, we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray asked Marianne Williamson what? And I think this is a question that everyone needs to pay attention to. At least I paid attention to it. And I think it's kind of a revealing moment, but also it asks, like, where are we on the left in reference to the goals? Where are we going in the future? And I think that question is really important, what she did ask her about what's next. We're also going to discuss Cornel West's hit piece. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's already started. This is just the beginning. There will be more as we get into 2024. So we're going to dive into that. We're also going to discuss Tucker Carlson outs Hunter Biden, and also with the help of a gentleman named Devin Archer. We're going to get into that story. That was Hunter Biden's business partner. So he has decided to come forward, and we have an interview that we're going to dive into. And last but not least, Joe Biden loses black voters. I couldn't fit people in there's a character limit. For those who don't know, there's a character limit in StreamYard. And so when I entered voters, it actually put me over the limit. So I was just like, people. Hey, but both could be true, right? Both could be true. So let's go ahead and dive into our first story. I'm just going to pull up tight the NC. Now, some of you've heard this before, but I think it's becoming more apparent as we're getting closer to 2024 that Joe Biden's numbers with Black voters is not doing too well. It's continuing to decrease. I covered this about a month or two ago, but it has not improved since then. And now there are people that are part of the Democrat establishment that are starting to worry because they know that the Democratic Party cannot win without the African American vote. So I want to get started with this clip from Case Study QB. There's two of them. The first one is Black voters are not enthusiastic about Biden's second term. So shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Let's go ahead and dive into this one first.
Joe Biden became the first Democrat to win a presidential election in Georgia since 1992 when he won in 2020. And just to show how crucial Black voters were to that win.
I'm just going to pause here because I want you to see her title and then we'll go back. Bloomberg White House reporter. So just keep in mind who she works for when you hear the talking points. So let's go back a little bit.
Georgia since 1992 when he won in 2020. And just to show how crucial Black voters were to that win, by our calculations, if less than 1% of Black voters stayed home or voted for Trump, the outcome of this election could have been very different. And basically something that we heard on the ground from the director of organizer from the New Georgia Project, which is easily pushing the largest voters registration efforts in the state. They've registered about 30,000 people alone this year. He said people are just frankly not running and jumping about another term of President Biden. And they're frankly.
But they weren't running and jumping in the beginning either. I just want to interject here for just a second to make something very, very clear. It wasn't so much that people were enthusiastic about voting for Joe Biden in 2020. It was more so that people were enthusiastic about voting against Donald Trump. So it wasn't so much that Joe Biden was this phenomenal candidate like how a Bernie Sanders was when he ran, right, in 2020 and 2016. It wasn't like people were that passionately invested in a Joe Biden presidency or the possibility of it. It was more so that people were just really passionate about not having Donald Trump serve a second term. And that's what we have to understand. So here we are going into 2024, and they are concerned because they notice that Black support under Joe Biden has decreased. It's been decreasing since the beginning of this year. Actually, I think it started in December of last year. It's continued to decrease. But also they realize, we've been talking to Black voters and they're just not enthusiastic about Joe Biden. I just want to remind you, it's not necessarily that people were enthusiastic about him last time either. We were just voting, against Donald Trump. And I think that just needs to be brought up again. Go back a little bit. Here we go.
And jumping about another term of President Biden. And they're frankly keeping their options open. And that's something that I heard from voters consistently is that while they're aware that Joe Biden could be the default, they're still wanting to see who else could potentially get in this race. At least one voter told me they were considering Cornel West. But the majority of people here said, even though they may just be voting for Joe Biden in the end of this, their big concerns right now is the economy. They're still feeling the stress of inflation and jobs are drying up in the state. Even though we've seen some of this good economic data, we just haven't seen those perceptions seem to catch up yet. And as you mentioned, these unfulfilled promises.
Pause here for a second. So I want to remind you again, she's talking about Georgia, right? So Joe Biden won Georgia. I still say that Georgia is a red state. I don't believe that Georgia is a swing state. I believe Georgia is still a red state. And then there were a lot of Black voters or non-voters that were mobilized by people like Stacey Abrams to get them to come out and register to vote so that you don't get Donald Trump again. I think that's where a lot of that energy came from. That being said, it is very possible that the Democrats could lose Georgia in 2024. Again, like I said, I don't want people to have this perception that Georgia is just this vastly blue state. It's not. It's really not. And some people could decide to stay home. You know, the ones that showed up in 2020 in the end could decide to stay home. So that is a possibility. So what happens if Joe Biden loses Georgia? Well, then you can look at a state like Arizona. That was another one that he was able to win. And I think it's a mistake for the Democrat establishment to kind of just not focus on Arizona. There have been a lot of talks about Georgia, how he has to keep Georgia. You have to mobilize those voters there. And I feel like Arizona, in a sense, has been neglected. Now, I don't know if they've just already, threw their hands up in the air and decided that they're not going to have a chance to get Arizona again. They don't think it is a reality, but I don't think any state should be overlooked, but particularly one like Arizona that did have a lot of independent voters that did show up to vote for Joe Biden. So I think it's a mistake that they're focusing so heavily on Georgia. And then there's also Pennsylvania that you have to keep in mind as well. It's very possible that Biden could lose Pennsylvania. So I think these are just some of the things that we have to keep in mind. But she's going to get into the unfulfilled promises, which I think is on a lot of people's mind. The economy, of course, the number one issue. And this is why I say, you cannot continue just to tell people these lies that you economically change their life going forward by the little bit of crumbs that you gave them, like the American Rescue Act or the child tax credit that you ended early. So I think that these things people will remember. Now, whether or not that affects if Black voters still show up to vote for Joe Biden in 2024, we'll have to wait and see. But I would not ignore those other states like Arizona and Pennsylvania in the event that Georgia does not pan out. That's just me. That's what I would do if I were running, right? That's what I would do. But I'm not the one running. Let me move this back a little bit here.
Mentioned these unfulfilled promises. Student debt was something that we heard consistently from voters, that they really wanted to see that policy come to fruition. But obviously, after the Supreme Court struck it down, we know Biden is trying again, but they were really disappointed that that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and Georgia is important, of course, on its own, but this seems to be also a microcosm of what's happening across the country. We know that Black Republicans made some inroads with particularly Black men last.
We're going to pause here for a second. Biden's 24 bid poses new challenge in battleground Georgia. So you saw that one. And I want to take it back to the other one that they showed really quickly. Biden told Georgia voters he was up to the task on voting rights. They aren't all feeling it. So that's important to see as well. And then he's going to bring up Black men. And this is going to take us into a whole other territory here.
On its own, but this seems to be also a microcosm of what's happening across the country. We know that Black Republicans made some inroads with particularly Black men last time around. We know that this president, despite a very impressive track record, suffers from a lack of enthusiasm from a lot of Democratic voters. So talk to us a little bit about how this could be worrisome beyond the borders of Georgia, but in other battleground states.
So I just want to chime in for just a second and explain that if we remember going back to 2020, particularly in Georgia, since they're focusing on that state, it was mainly Black women that showed up to vote for Joe Biden. Yeah, there were Black men that did vote, but if you look at the numbers, it was overwhelming support from Black women that came out to vote for Joe Biden. I just want to say this because they are already starting to do this blame game with Black men. It's starting early, and I'm going to point this out in another clip as well, but I want people to pay attention to this because they're looking to blame anyone. They're looking to blame Cornel West for running third party. They're looking to blame people like Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. for running in the Democratic Party, trying to primary challenge Joe Biden. They're looking to blame this no labels party, which somehow is supposed to have ballot access, which I have not seen yet. And if it comes down to it, they're even looking to blame Black men. Wait for it.
Absolutely. That's something that someone brought up to us is like, when there is an enthusiasm gap, you need to pay attention to it. I think this was a problem for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She was not able to galvanize enough black voters to get behind her. And continuously, black voters seem to be a litmus test for Democrats in this state. You need.
But I thought it was Jill Stein's fault that Hillary Clinton didn't win. See, she's right here. Listen to this. In reference to Hillary Clinton.
You need to pay attention to it. I think this was a problem for Hillary Clinton in 2016. She was not able to galvanize enough black voters to get behind her. And
that was Hillary Clinton's fault. She was not. She was not. Even compared to what the polls showed, compared to election night, people stayed home. People stayed home. So yeah, it was nice to hear someone say that on mainstream media instead of blaming Jill Stein.
Continuously, black voters seem to be a litmus test for Democrats in this state. You need to be able to secure and motivate the black vote in order to win in national elections. And something that people raise a concern about is Biden hasn't been in the state very much. He's been there 3 times since he's taken office. He's been to other swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, a lot more. And there's also concerns about investment. A lot of these groups said that they're not seeing investment until the October before a major election. And black voters really need to see sincere and continuous engagement in order to feel like their vote matters and they're not just being thought of every 4 years. And then their promises, their priorities are forgotten for the next 4 years.
Right. You can't just come around when it's time for your reelection. And that's typically what tends to happen. Like, you can't just show up. You can't just ignore people the entire, term that you have, whether you're a president or a congressman, city councilors as well. They do this too. You can't just ignore all those people who came out to support you, your constituents, until it's time for you to run for re-election again. And that's oftentimes what will happen. Now, there's another part of this interview that I do want to show you as well. Also, shout out to Case Study QB, asking if the Biden campaign is aware of black voters potentially supporting Cornel West and how to keep those voters in line. I want you to pay attention to the vocabulary that they're using and how they talk about black voters. Listen to this.
And you mentioned Cornel West, who by any measure is a pretty fringe candidate, but
there's that word again, fringe. Anything outside of the duopoly, fringe. Anything outside of the status quo, fringe. They continue to use that. I told you they all have the same PR talking points. That's why you can literally listen to CNN, MSNBC. You'll hear the same thing. They use the same terms.
We all remember Jill Stein in 2016. If West even pulls off a sliver of voters, black voters in particular, that could be the difference in some of these states. So tell us what.
But this is a common misconception. It's not like Jill Stein pulled voters away from Hillary Clinton. And we've explained this multiple times. Jill Stein, the voters who supported her would not have supported Hillary Clinton. This idea that this third party candidate comes in and they're taking away people from Joe Biden or they're taking away people from Hillary Clinton, that is not the case. Those people would not have voted for them, even if there wasn't a third party candidate. We've talked about this before. I talked about this on Rising. Robbie talked about this in reference to Gary Johnson as well. He said he would not have supported Donald Trump if Gary Johnson had not been in the race. This is a common misconception, but I don't think it's a misconception in reference to mainstream media. I think they know this because it's been said on their show multiple times before. They are repeating that talking point to instill fear in the American people. That is what they are doing. And they're going to continue to say that so that you become afraid and you will not vote for a third party candidate. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. So this idea of him saying that Jill Stein pulled away these black voters from Hillary Clinton, no, she didn't. It's the way they talk about us as if like we are the property of the Democratic Party, as if we belong to the Democratic Party, as if the Democratic Party owns us. Let me continue. We'll go back a little bit so you can hear that part again.
In some of these states. So tell us, what's the Biden campaigns? Are they aware of this potential issue, and what's their plan to try to make sure they keep those voters in line?
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? And she's sitting right there. So she's on this show. Listen to what he just said. No pushback. Watch this. Listen to the way that they talk about us. And I seriously don't understand how more people don't have a problem with this rhetoric. Listen to
potential
this.
Issue, and what's their plan to try to make sure they keep those voters in line?
To make sure they keep those voters in line. As if Black voters are misbehaving if they choose not to come out and support Joe Biden again. What? If we choose to vote third party, if we choose to sit at home, we're misbehaving. They need to keep us in line. As if they own us. She's not going to push back on that rhetoric, by the way. She's not going to push back on that. That's right, Sean. Keep those people in line. Exactly. And she's not going to push back. But again, she's with Bloomberg. So keep that in mind. Listen to this.
Certainly, strategists have raised concerns about third-party candidates, not just Cornel West, but also this no labels candidates that we're hearing about. But I think the thing that the Biden world is banking on is Donald Trump. Their hope is that if he is, in fact, the nominee, that will galvanize people in the same way that it did in 2020.
I disagree with that a little bit, because if that were the case, they wouldn't be trying to go after Donald Trump so hard right now with all these different indictments. We'll talk about another one tomorrow. There's a new indictment with all these different indictments so that he does not run again if they weren't concerned that he could win again. Because think about this for a second. This isn't 2020 anymore. Now we've had 4 years of Donald Trump and we're going on 4 years of Joe Biden. Now we've had both. And economically, people are not doing well for the most part. Working class people potentially are not doing well for the most part. So the fact that now we have had both and people are able to look at their bank accounts and look at their pocketbook and see like, look, this is not working out for me. We still have to deal with inflation. The grocery store prices are still high. This is still a problem. The economy is still a problem. So to that, I say, if the Democratic Party is banking on Donald Trump being the nominee, then why are they working so hard to prevent that from happening in the first place? And if they're banking on Donald Trump being the nominee, I would say that is a bad strategy if they actually want to win, because Donald Trump is doing really well in the polls. Every time he gets another indictment, his poll results increase every time. So I think if they're trying to recreate that same magic and energy that they had in 2020 about you can't get Trump again, so you're going to come flock to Joe Biden, I think that would be a mistake this time around. Let me let her continue.
There was voters who purely cast a vote against Donald Trump, and they're hoping that threats to democracy and him being on the ballot again will have the same effect that it did then. But
it won't. Because that was before we had a Biden presidency. You see, back then, during that time, for the people who voted out of fear, the people were like, man, I really don't like either one of them, but I'm going to go vote for Biden because I don't want to get Trump again. That was before we had Joe Biden as president. We have now lived under Joe Biden's presidency. So I don't know what kind of magic they're trying to recreate, but it doesn't look so well. Last time we looked at the polls, it's like, what, 69% of the American people don't even want Joe Biden to run again. And there's also the possibility, which came out earlier today, of Gavin Newsom possibly running a shadow campaign. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But I just don't think that this is going to work the way it did before.
Yeah, that certainly is something in some ways that the White House is counting on. Dynamics would change if the Republicans ended up with a candidate that wasn't Donald Trump. But polls suggest there's not really any sign of that.
You know, it was just appalling to me the way he said, keep those voters in line. That made me feel some kind of way. And apparently it made Nick feel some kind of way too. Now, Nick is my comrade over at RBN. So Nick is already drawing attention to this. Democrats are already prepared to blame black men again for Trump winning. Liberals love blaming black men for their election failures. Meanwhile, Trump won the white woman vote in both 2016 and 2020. It's all about control. Democrats think they own us. So let's hear what Nick had to say in reference to this. This is crazy.
People are finally leaving the Democratic Party plantation, and it's about damn time. Polls show that black Americans are losing faith in Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. My reaction to this is, what the hell took you guys so damn long? It was Joe Biden and Barack Obama that tanked black wealth because of the way they handled the 2008 financial crisis. It was Jim Crow Joe who wrote the crime bill and created a police state that is occupying our communities. Black people are hammered by these anti-black policies, and we never get a black agenda because the black community rendered themselves completely irrelevant by voting for one party at around an 80 to 90% clip. Black people need to stop listening to liberals and establish our own self-determination as a political voting bloc. We need to say loudly and boldly that without any black agenda, there is no black vote.
Period. Period. We're the only group. We're the only group that does this. It's just like, okay, yeah, you don't have anything for us. No black agenda, no policies in reference to the black community at all. But we'll just come out and support you anyway because Republicans are bad. We don't get anything. And you wonder, like, how long is this supposed to continue? Because we will not always be the group that the Democratic Party is going to depend on in order to win. Mark my words, 10, 15 years from now, it will eventually get to the point where they won't need our vote in order to win. The Democratic Party is focusing on other groups, believe it or not, other groups, and trying to capture those groups because they hear the frustrations from the black community. They hear people asking for things like reparations. They hear those things, and they're starting to realize, we're starting to lose some black voters to the Republican Party. Some of them are walking away from the political space altogether and choosing not to vote. We have to tap into some of those other groups. And I believe that the group that they're really trying to win over is going to be the Latino community. I think they're going to try to win them over. They are the largest minority population in the United States. We're not. So strategically, if you're looking at the numbers, that actually makes sense. I think that's what they're going to do. And if that happens, then we would have missed our chance to try to get any type of concessions from the Democratic Party. We're not getting anything. And once they don't need us, then they're really not going to hear us. Just something to think about. Let Nick finish.
Black agenda, there is no black vote. And the funny thing is, this is how every single community behaves. But for some reason, black Americans are the only people expected to just give up their vote without any sort of policy demands. Every election, there is a bidding war over the support of suburban white women. Despite the fact that white women vote for Donald Trump twice, the liberal establishment keep blaming black men for Donald Trump winning. That's because liberals believe they own us. They believe we are obligated to support them. This is why we need a black-led third party in order to break away from the two-party duopoly as a people.
There you go. That's right. That part right there. We need to break away. And this is what I'm saying. Like, now I'm not telling you break away and go to the Republican Party, but I am telling you that this ownership mentality, we just can't continue to do this anymore. You said Rockfin's back up? Okay, let me see. Yeah, that was weird. Like I couldn't, okay, Rockfin's back up now. Let me see if they let me, if I can still stream. Unfortunately, those people missed like the first part. But no, it's still not working. Yeah, Rockfin's still not working. Like it's up, but it's not letting me stream over there. Live feed not started on it though. Yeah, I'll have to upload it to Rockfin. I just don't have time. Oh wait, I think it started. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I think they were just having some issues. Well, we'll see if it comes back up. Anyway, I have to keep talking. I want to finish the story. Anywho, this is the article that Nick was referring to in that video, which I think is important for people to see. Some black men lose faith in Biden, Democrats in 2024. So let's go on here. It says Bata, a 28-year-old in the key voting state of Georgia, is among the millions of black voters who helped deliver President Joe Biden the White House in 2020. 3 years later, he is one of the voters who Democrats fear could cost Biden a second term. Could cost. Again, let's pay attention to the vocabulary. Biden will cost his own self like this second term. That's his fault. I mean, they say this as if it's owed to him. That's the weird part to me. Okay, it's live on Rockfin, Eric. They say this as if we're just supposed to give it to him just because he's already there. Cost him the election. This is a hot mess. Disappointed by what he sees as Democrats lurch to the left, free spending and empty promises, but also turned off by far-right Republicans. He goes on to say he sees nothing but bad options at the ballot box next year. What I'm noticing across the Democratic Party right now is there's a lot of pandering to the black community. I agree. It seems like they do a lot to try to make it seem like they are the party for young black men or black men as a whole, but they don't back it with anything. They don't follow through. The most loyal Democratic constituency, black voters played a large role in rescuing Biden's struggling 2020 presidential campaign in the South Carolina primary and sending him to the White House with Democrats in control of the Senate, thanks to further success in Georgia. In return, many black voters expected Biden and Democrats to push new federal protections against restrictive local voting laws, police and criminal injustice reform, student loan debt relief, and economic empowerment. Two problems with two of these: the criminal justice reform and the student loan debt relief. Criminal justice reform. Joe Biden is the architect of the crime bill. This is why I did not expect this from him. Student loan debt relief. Joe Biden is the one who wrote the legislation that prevents you from filing bankruptcy on student loans. That's why I didn't expect much from him for anything. This is not the type of person to deliver on these demands. You can blame him for some of the problems that we have with it. Many of those efforts have been blocked by Republicans, leaving Biden to ask voters to let him finish the job with a second term with no clear path to get these things done. Finish the job with the second term. It can still be blocked by Republicans. And it's not just Republicans who have been blocking it. And this is the thing about some of these outlets like Reuters, Politico, that it just irks me when they make these kind of statements, because they're ignoring the fact that you also have Democrat politicians who have also voted against things like the $15 minimum wage. 7 Democrats and 1 independent voted against it. But you never hear them mention that. Even when Bernie Sanders complained about that legislation, he said the Republicans blocked it. Bernie Sanders sit right there in the Senate. He knows damn well there were Democrats who voted against it. So he's learned to play their game too. On the other hand, Democrats' focus on LGBTQ and abortion rights leaves voters like McConnell feeling alienated. I'm probably getting turned away from the left just because the Democrats are turning more left in my books. So let's go ahead and issue a correction here. The Democratic Party is not left. I don't know why people keep saying this. Polls and Reuters interviews show young black voters and black men of all ages are losing faith in Democrats, Biden, and perhaps even the political process just 3 years after the U.S. biggest protest for racial justice and civil rights in a generation. Yeah, we had the George Floyd protests, but then what happened after that? The Democratic Party decided to give more money to the police. So, yeah, that's great. We had people out in the streets, but we didn't get anything. Let's continue. The vast majority of Black voters, including men, are still expected to choose Biden over a Republican. But the question for Democrats is whether disillusioned Black voters will turn out to the polls in large enough numbers in crucial cities, from Philadelphia to Atlanta, Milwaukee, Detroit, to keep Biden in the White House. Democrats need to understand that there is a growing population, especially with Black men, who are reaching the point of being fed up with always being pushed over and looked over. That's coming from Leland, who's a political campaign manager who is running as a write-in candidate for Nashville City Council. Democrats' failure to secure widespread student loan relief and legalize marijuana has been disappointing. First of all, both of these, I want to remind you, could have been done by executive order. Joe Biden can legalize marijuana by executive order, or at least to criminalize it. He could have done the student loan relief by executive order. So just FYI. Turnout drops. Self-identified Black Americans make up 14.2% of the U.S. population, or 42.7 million people, a 30% jump from 2000. These Americans are 5 years younger than the population as a whole, with an average age of 33, and Democrats earning their loyalty is crucial for the party to keep winning in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia, and to recapture districts in the South in the future. But they don't want to give you anything. They don't want to do anything for Black communities. They want to implement legislation and policies that actually work against the Black community, but they still want you to come out and vote for them. Why? Because they put on kente cloth and they kneeled after George Floyd was killed? They don't want to do anything. They don't do this for other groups. They don't do it for other groups. When the Latino community asks for certain concessions, they give them those concessions, then they come out, right? Like, you should be doing stuff for us now. You should be giving us concessions now, not after, when you know you're not going to. No other group deals with this. Instead, the opposite is happening. Black voter turnout dropped by nearly 10 percentage points from 51.7% in the 2018 midterm elections to 42% in 2022. Let's take a look at that. White voter turnout slipped by only 1.5 points to 53.4. And if we look at the chart here, it says fewer Black voters in the past election spell worry for Biden 2024 bid. So if we look at presidential elections, you'll see still, till this day, the highest Black voter turnout, at least in my adult life, was for President Barack Obama in 2008 and in 2012. You can see this here. So there's Obama. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make this bigger for you guys. There we go. I just wanted to make it so you can see a little bit bigger. But Barack Obama right here. And then if you look at the midterm elections, well, let's go to 2020 first. 2020, here's Joe Biden right here, right there. But Barack Obama still holds that record. Now, if we go to the midterm elections, 80% of voting age U.S. citizens. Again, you'll see here's Barack Obama's president. So they show the turnout here from 2008 going through. And then you see there's an increase here. I don't know why they numbered it this way. There's an increase here. And then you see it going back down again. That really does not surprise me. Black voters have participated in the U.S. presidential election at higher rates than the national average for over 2 decades. Black voter turnout was down across the country in 2022. But people told me that wasn't going to happen. And that's the thing. It's like, it's true. When the midterm elections happened last year, people didn't turn out the way that they did in 2020. Now, granted, most people show up to vote for the presidential election, but it's still down. It's going down. We saw it in the polls, the surveys, the exit polls, in every way you could measure it. That's coming from Michael McDonald a politics professor at the University of Florida. Some Democrats have also been disturbed by recent polls showing that some Black voters are defecting to Republicans. 1 in 5 Black people under the age of 50 voted Republican in the 2022 midterms, roughly double the number of their elders. According to a previously unreported analysis of exit polling data by HIT Strategies, a public opinion research firm aligned with the Democrats that routinely surveys Black Americans. Black men and women under the age of 50 voted Republican in similar numbers. Republican Donald Trump, 12%, share of the Black vote in 2020 was 4 percentage points higher than it was in 2016. A Reuters Ipsos poll conducted in July found that 18% of Black Americans would pick Trump over Biden in a hypothetical matchup. That's actually pretty high. 18%. Compared to 46% who favored Biden, including about 1 in 4 Black men, compared to about 1 in 7 Black women. So what does this show us, ladies and gentlemen? It shows us that things are starting to change politically, that the Democratic Party is obviously afraid that they're going to lose Black voters, and they're already losing Black voters, but they're afraid particularly that the support of Black voters in 2020 is not going to be the same in 2024, that those numbers may decrease. And that is what they're afraid of. And I don't know what to tell you, other than the fact that now we have had both. We had Trump and we had Biden, and economically, things are pretty bad right now. But Black people don't belong to the Democratic Party. Like, they need to lose this idea that they own us, that we're property. We're not. And I think the best way of doing that is by not voting for them. They're not giving you any concessions. Again, other groups don't do this. Thank you, Perry. Today, the African Revolution is spreading to Senegal, while Nigeria and other neo-colonial stooges are preparing to send troops to Niger. Yeah, we talked about Niger yesterday. Or no, Tuesday. Yes, we talked about Niger on Tuesday. Saul says, no one's standing in line for 8 hours again for Jim Crow Joe. It's over, bro. Outside Steeler fan, Arizona, he's not winning for sure again. Yeah, they don't even talk about Arizona anymore. Remember that? Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Dems never reached out to young Black vote, only older Black vote, especially women. The all that matters is that you vote block. Well, they're passing on, and Dems now left with a bunch of Black, pissed off, Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z. Yeah, that is true. Dwayne, I was a Jill Stein supporter, and I would have never voted for Hillary in a million years. See? Yeah. Thank you, Laugh. Why do U.S. citizens who care about the poor and oppressed vote Biden? Not many watch MSM news anymore, so it's not Trump derangement. Are those voters rich and selfish or dumb? Some people still do have Trump derangement, Laugh, believe it or not. It still is a thing. Like, some people still are afraid. They're like, oh God, no Donald Trump. So there is that. And people may not be watching mainstream media as much now, but give it time. As we get closer to the election, that will change. Thank you for the super sticker, Fat Mantive. And thank you, Gannon. Why isn't Afro Man on the poll? That's my candidate. That's a good point. I reached out to Afro Man and I haven't heard anything in reference to the campaign. So I don't know what's happening with that. But I'm not sure. But also, I can only put 4 people. Unfortunately, the YouTube polls only have 4 options. So I'm sorry about that. And thank you, Roger. Shout out to brother Phil Scott for showing that 1 month ago. Thank you, Roger. And I'll take the comment on Rockfin and we'll go to the next story. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. We should not make the mistake of waiting for Dems to present us with their Black agenda, but instead we present them with ours. Also, the best way to cut Dems off at the pass where they jump over us and try to get other groups is just destroy all parties with CBIs as an amendment saying political parties in the state of blank is now deemed unconstitutional at every level of government, one and done. So what Roger is saying there is to implement ballot measures, like ballot initiatives in your states, those of you that live in BI states, to get rid of political parties. So let's go on. Speaking of Joe Biden, if you have not heard, Hunter Biden's business partner, former business partner, Devin Archer, actually did come forward and testify in reference to Hunter Biden's business dealings and Burisma. And he dropped a number of bombshells. Some of you may be interested in. Number one of the things that Devin Archer said is that not only was Joe Biden on one of those calls, the business calls where Joe Biden claimed multiple times publicly on television that he was never on those calls and he was never in the room and he never had anything to do with his son's business deals. Devin Archer has come forward and said not only was Joe Biden involved, but that Joe Biden was on 20 calls. Not one, but 20. So we're going to dive into this story now that Devin Archer has come forward. We're going to get started with this clip from Nico House. Nick and Nico are like knocking it out the park with these short clips that they're doing for Hotspot. But Nico's going to start off by saying Joe Biden is a liar, which I thought is pretty interesting. He's going to start off, it says Joe Biden is a liar. His son, Hunter Biden, is a liar. And the testimony by Hunter's friend and business partner, Devin Archer, proved how much the Bidens have been lying to America and the Democrats that have defended them. We'll start with this, and then we are also going to go into the interview that Devin Archer had with Tucker Carlson. So let's go ahead and dive into this.
Joe Biden is such a fucking liar, bro. Joe Biden claimed that he had never been involved with any of Hunter Biden's business dealings at all, or talked to anyone involving Hunter Biden's business dealings. Survey says that is a lie. In fact, he joined dinners with Hunter Biden's business associates and was on the phone with them on speakerphone at least 20 times. Joe Biden also claimed that he had nothing to do with Hunter Biden being appointed to the board of Burisma. He had nothing to do with the Ukrainian energy company. Survey says that is also a lie. One of Hunter Biden's best friends and business associates came out and said that Hunter Biden was only invited to sit on the board of Burisma because of the brand he brings, with his father being the vice president. He even takes it a step further and says that Burisma literally wouldn't exist. It would have failed as a business if it wasn't for Joe Biden protecting them. Now, these are just a couple of revelations from the testimony of David Archer yesterday. But the important part is that we recognize how much of a fucking liar Joe Biden is, and I can't believe that people would be okay with this, considering how people reacted to the idea that Trump was doing the same thing. I'm just asking people to keep the same energy, bro.
Very well said there. So I want to go ahead and dive into, he makes it very funny. I want to dive into this statement here in reference to Hunter Biden, Devin Archer, and the burner phone. So this happened recently as well. Hunter Biden told this then business partner, Devin Archer, to purchase a burner phone just 3 days before a meeting was set up with Vice President Joe Biden at the White House. Is this Breaking Bad? I mean, what is happening here? A burner phone? Why do you need a burner phone? Typically, people get burner phones when there's something they're trying to hide. They don't want it to be traced, right? Let's continue here. Who buys a burner phone unless they are planning on doing something illegal? Weeks later, after the White House meeting, it was announced that Archer and Hunter would be joining the board at Ukrainian gas company Burisma. Buy a cell phone from a 7-Eleven or CVS tomorrow, and I'll do the same. Hunter said in an email on April 13th, 2014. This email was obtained by Daily Mail. When are people going to learn with the emails? As noted by the Daily Mail, Hunter kept 13 phone numbers active on his AT&T account, and some may have even belonged to Joe Biden. Nothing going on here, folks. So if I click on it, let me go to the second part here. This is the beginning of the email from Robert Biden, okay, to Devin Archer. I don't know if you guys can see that well. Let me zoom. Anywho, he's given Devin Archer a list of things here, right? Burisma has an opportunity here to play the hero, yada, yada. But this piece right here, number 22, buy a cell phone from a 7-Eleven or CVS tomorrow, and I'll do the same. Email is a pain, huh? Always comes back to haunt you. Now we're going to go into part 1 of the Devin Archer interview. First and foremost, I'm actually surprised he's done an interview so early on. I assumed he would not do any interviews probably anytime soon, or not do an interview at all, is what I thought. But no, he has decided to sit down and do an interview. And the reason why I say that is because the testimony that Devin Archer gave was behind closed doors. That's why I couldn't, stream it the way I have for other testimonies that you guys have seen, like RFK Jr., like Matt Taibbi, etc. This particular one was behind closed doors, so none of us got a chance to actually see, this testimony take place. But there's a thing called meeting minutes. But anywho, he's coming forward here with Tucker Carlson, and it's going to get pretty deep. He's going to dive into some things in reference to his role working together with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's role. There's also a letter that's going to be revealed in this interview as well. So let's dive into this. I know some of you are not on Twitter, but Tucker Carlson's doing shows only on Twitter. So let's go ahead and dive into this interview here. Part 1, Devin Archer.
So you worked with Hunter Biden in a bunch of different businesses. What were the specific skills that he brought to clients?
Well, at the end of the day, he had a career in Washington. Graduated Yale Law School and had a very big network in DC, and brought that know-how and understanding of DC and ultimately the Biden brand.
The know-how. So as far as I could tell, he wasn't doing legal work. Correct. He wasn't in the counsel's office at Burisma, right?
No.
So the network and the Biden brand sounds like the kind of key component of
absolutely
what he was bringing.
Yep.
Do you think that he would have been in those businesses, not having a business background, without his father being in a government position?
It's hard to speculate in those regards. I mean,
yeah.
I think when we initially met and he talked about his advisory business, his business that needed to transition from lobbying to advisory, and the interest in private equity, it seemed like a new and interesting network for us to expand our business.
One thing I was going to say here that I thought was pretty interesting, he doesn't look the way I thought he would look. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way. For some reason, when I pictured, okay, this guy's a business partner with Hunter Biden, he just doesn't look the way that I thought he would look. I thought maybe he might have on glasses or something like that. Like, he just looks like a laid back, chill kind of dude. Not what I pictured at all.
Whether he could have, been in that position, it's hard for me to speculate. But
right.
Obviously, the brand of Biden, adds a lot of power when your dad's the vice president.
For sure. And there was a time, maybe 10 years ago, when private equity, maybe like AI now, was just one of those terms people throw out. I'm in private equity.
Right.
But the mechanics, having done it, coming
right.
from a business background yourself, are kind of complex.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a complex business. Takes years of training. But again, the initial idea around the business, they were going to provide, the government insight and an additional network to raise capital, and then, deal with regulatory issues that you might have at the corporate level.
Right. Regulatory issues.
Exactly.
Okay. So that would be more his area.
Right. That would be his space.
Right. But Did he have a sophisticated understanding of regulation, do you think?
I think that he led a team that had a sophisticated.
Okay, because I lived in Washington a long time around a lot of regulation. Also a very complex area.
Absolutely. I think you got to be an expert in knowing the guy, and he was the guy that was the expert in knowing the guy.
He was an expert in knowing the guy.
Right.
And who was the guy he knew?
Well, he knew a lot of people, but obviously there was some familiar, his brother, his father, some of his father's siblings. So he knew a lot of people. And obviously I know you're pointing to, the father being the key relationship.
No, I'm just trying to get a sense of, Washington's not a money town.
Right.
People aren't in business in Washington for the most part, and most people don't have business skills
Almost everybody in DC works for the government. This is a true thing. It's really funny if you guys have ever lived in DC, but my family's originally from Baltimore, Maryland, but I know so many people that in that DC area, right? But a lot of my friends actually got jobs in DC after undergrad. But it's so interesting because it's the only place I can go visit where almost everybody that you meet works for the federal government in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's I work at the VA, I work, the post office, I work at the Pentagon, I work at there's so many different government buildings there. So typically that's why a lot of people are there. So when he says it's not a business kind of thing, that's what he's referring to. Yeah, because a lot of people work for the government.
Noticed in 30 years of living there. So really the business of Washington is selling access. That's what it looked like to me.
Yes.
Not just Hunter Biden, but
I think that's one of the core misconceptions. I mean, it seems like when understanding a regulatory environment means selling access at the end of the day. That's how I interpret it. And I think that's how most people in Wall Street, whether they admit it or not, interpret it.
Yeah. So we've got a complex business that intersects with government. We need a guy who knows it.
Right. How do I, deal with getting a guy a visa that needs to come over for a business deal? Right. Call our lobbyist that knows the guy in DHS or used to work in DHS or, in Customs and Border Patrol or the people at the embassy and state. They might be able to help. So there are very tactical elements that are regulatory and compliance and governance that you have to go through, and you got to know the guy that worked at the old agency that now has the lobbying firm that can go back to the agency and get things put to the front of the line.
So the reason I'm asking this is because it's not to give the Bidens a pass, hardly, but when people say, well, there's some question about whether Hunter was trading on his father's name, if you live in Washington, that's the whole city right there.
Right. I think you know the answer to that. At the end of the day, so he had the best advantage to do that because of where he was.
Right.
And, we thought that when we went into business, this was a great opportunity for us.
So I get it. And you're not the only one who did that.
Right. There were a lot of
Hunter
businesses.
Biden's not the only son of a famous government official who's done this, right? At all. But I just wonder, when you hear people say, well, it's kind of an open question.
Right.
About why they hired Hunter Biden. That's pretty disingenuous, no?
Right. I think at the end of it, so when you look at there are people that maybe were, sons or relatives or brother-in-laws of other high-ranking officials, but I think what we ran into and with what Hunter ran into was almost like an Icarus issue. So he got it was too close to the sun. It was too good to be true. And the connections were too close and the scrutiny too much.
Yes.
And it ended up destroying, it left a wake of a lot of destruction in businesses over a number of years.
So how many...
So basically, long story short, Hunter Biden got there because of who his daddy is. Basically. And they saw him as, I guess, a valuable asset because of the fact that his father at that time, was the vice president.
It's been reported, and you have said that there were occasions when Joe Biden would call in with clients present on a speakerphone.
Right.
How many times do you think that happened?
I mean, over a 10-year partnership, I would, the number I'm going with is 20. That's probably the amount that I kind of record.
We're going to pause here for a second. But remember, Joe Biden said he was never at those meetings. He was never on those calls. He was never involved in his son's business in any way, shape, or form. He's on record saying this multiple times. Remember during the debate that he had with Trump in 2020, where Trump pointed these things out and he was like, he's loony. I've never had any involvement in my son's business. Well, and now you see proof that that's not the case. He was involved. not only was he involved, but he was involved. Apparently, he said over 10 years, there was about 20 calls that he was involved on. We're talking about a 10-year period. I don't know, man. I don't know if Devin Archer has security, but might want to look into that.
Yeah, a lot, you could say.
So Joe Biden, who's very much a product of Washington, of course, must have known that he was calling in to effectively a business meeting that his son was having. I mean, he must have understood that was kind of what his son was selling.
Well, it's hard for me to speculate on that.
But like, I guess my question, just to keep it to the facts, Joe Biden, then the sitting vice president, knew that there were Hunter's business associates in the room.
Yeah, I think I can definitively say at particular dinners or meetings, he knew there were business associates, and or if I was there, I was a business associate too. So I think
that's right.
Or if any of the other colleagues from the DC office or the New York office were there. So yeah, at times there were. From the to be completely clear on the calls, I don't know if it was an orchestrated call in or not. It certainly was powerful though, because if you're sitting with a foreign business person and you hear the vice president's voice, that's prize enough. I mean, that's pretty impactful stuff for anyone in the world.
It's been reported, and I know that it is true, that the Hunter and his brother were very close to their dad.
Absolutely.
Which I think is great.
Yep.
I've got a lot of kids. I'm very close to them, talk to them every day.
Yeah.
Never called them on speaker during a business meeting. That's weird. You've got a lot of kids. You're close to them. Do you call them on speaker during business meetings?
Do I call?
I mean, what is that? A grown man calling his dad on a speakerphone during a business meeting?
Right. And to be clear, sometimes it was the call was coming in and the speaker would go on. So it's just the president. You have to be. I mean, you understand DC, right? So the power to have that access in that conversation, and it's not in a scheduled conference call, and it's a part of your family. That's like the pinnacle of power in DC.
100%. I guess I'm pivoting against the lie that I'm hearing people tell with a straight face. Congressman Goldman, for example, that we don't really know what was going on. Really? You're taking a call from the vice president and you put it on speaker. It's not just, hey, Dad, I'm in a meeting with some buddies.
Right.
It's let me put my dad, the vice president, on speaker.
Yeah.
And if he was put on speaker, then that means the other people who were in those conference, that were in that room or those conference meetings, they heard it too. I don't know why. Like someone asked in the chat, they said, why is Devin Archer, why is he telling on him? I don't know. I don't know, but maybe Devin Archer is just like, look, I heard some shit's about to pop off in reference to Joe Biden and his son and the business dealings and stuff. And Burisma, let me go ahead and give them what I know and clear my name right now. Maybe that was it.
Yep. In the rear view, it's an abuse of soft power, I'd say.
An abuse of soft power. Interesting. When did you meet Joe Biden?
Joe Biden, I met the first time probably at the 2000 convention. I think it was in LA, and then Boston was 2004. So those two times I probably shook hands as they made kind of the power circles around the you've been to them through the skyboxes.
So Joe Biden can't even say that he never met Devin Archer. It's not even just about the phone calls. Remember, he's a business partner too, or was a business partner as well. So he can't even say that he never met him. He met him in person as well. This goes back to 2004. So I'm just trying to create a timeline here. And
then following that, really when our partnership started in 2008, 2009-ish, conversation started. That's when I re-met Hunter and actually had a sit down and meal with him, talked about the transition from lobbying into strategic advisory, and then kind of some type of coalescence around having a private equity fund that would have this unique access and understanding of a regulatory environment in DC. Again,
got it.
To be clear.
How many times do you think you met Joe Biden during the course of your relationship with Hunter?
How many times? I should have this off the top of my head since I've been asked so many times. Probably same thing, 20.
So I got one last question for you, and we'll do a much longer interview and get the entire story. But we found this letter, kind of amazing. It's from January 20th, 2011, which I think puts you in your late 30s, mid to late 30s.
Right.
Okay, so you're a younger man. This is from the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, to you personally, and it's personalized here at the bottom. Devin Archer, Rosemont Seneca Partners, that was your partnership with Hunter Biden in Georgetown. Dear Devin, I apologize for not getting a chance to talk to you at the luncheon yesterday. I was having trouble getting away from hosting President Who.
Let me pause here for a second so you guys can read this. So I don't know why he wrote a letter. Like this was kind of odd to me. It was just like he wrote Devin a letter instead of just texting him or emailing him. I don't know, but he wrote him a letter and he did sign it. So I think that's important for people to see. I was having trouble getting away from hosting President Who. I hope I get a chance to see you again soon with Hunter. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. Thanks for coming. Happy you guys are together. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Joe Biden can't even try to claim that he doesn't know this guy. He never met this guy. He can't try to claim that.
Hu Jintang was running China at that point. I hope I get a chance to see you again soon with Hunter. I hope you enjoyed lunch. Thanks for coming. Sincerely, Joseph R. Biden Jr. P.S. Handwritten, happy you guys are together. So there are many levels here. But here's the Vice President of the United States saying to you, a man in his mid-30s, who's not a government official, I'm sorry I was occupied with the guy who runs the world's largest country. I would much rather talk to you and thank you. What was he thanking you for?
Well, first of all, it's a lovely letter, and it was.
It's quite enthusiastic. It's a little weird, though, right?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of the beginning of our partnership, and he was thanking me and thanking Hunter. I think at the end of the day for bringing this idea of this government regulatory strategic advisory business into the private equity world, and I think
you heard that right. That was the beginning of their partnership. But Joe Biden says he wasn't involved, remember? Joe Biden has nothing to do with this at all.
He was excited about the prospects for Hunter, and he was just thanking me. I think it was a nice gesture.
It was a nice, for sure.
For sure.
Very polite. It gets a 10 on the etiquette scale, but he's a Vice President of the United States,
right,
and he's talking about foreign business deals with you and thanking you for that.
I think.
You guys heard that? Remember, I just want to remind you again, this is when Joe Biden was vice president. He was doing this shady stuff. Do you guys wonder if Barack Obama knew about this? Do you think Obama knew that Joe Biden was doing this? Let's continue. Sorry, this was winding back a little bit. Okay.
He's a Vice President of the United States,
right,
and he's talking about foreign business deals with you and thanking you for that.
I think, again, it goes back to my earlier point I think I hit the jackpot in finding the regulatory environment or company that can navigate right to the top. But, obviously, as time was told, being a little bit too close to the sun ends up burning you.
For sure. And it did you, and you suffered greatly for it. And this is not a criticism of you. I would think as a business guy, you use every advantage. These are not business guys. This is the Vice President of the United States. He's not allowed to be working on businesses with foreign governments while he's Vice President.
That's right.
Not that I know of.
But here he is.
Right.
Amazing. We'll be back. Devin Archer, thank you.
Thank you.
You're here, people.
So that is part one. Part two has not been released yet, so I will stay tuned for that one. That'll probably be they'll probably post that next week, I think. But yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you guys, but this is all coming out right before the election. And I'm really serious to see if this is going to play a role in any way, shape, or form. So for the media outlets that are choosing to ignore this, like the way that MSNBC and CNN have covered it, they've covered this in a way also obviously favorably towards Joe Biden. if you're going to hold people accountable for corruption, then you got to do it regardless what political party that they're in. So if they're going to hold Trump accountable for his corruption, they need to hold Joe Biden accountable for his corruption. That's just how it is. But we know how the media works, right? But this is a mess. This is a mess. They tried to arrest Devin Archer. They were going to try to arrest him before he actually testified. Just FYI. So I didn't even know if he was going to make it to the testimony, but he made it. And now he has the interview out. So I'm pretty sure we're going to hear more. That's part 1. There should be a part 2 coming out, I would imagine. Let me go to some of the comments. Lisa says, who's Robert Biden? Joe Biden's middle name is Robert. So that's probably who that was referring to. How to Sober says, Sabby Sabs, how do we organize a ballot initiative to get rid of parties? I need a tutorial. I would recommend that you talk to Roger Meadows, who is right here. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Hunter, graduate of Yale, legacy admission must end. Joe Biden went to State College, I thought. I can double check. I could have sworn Joe Biden I don't think he went to Yale. I could have sworn he went to a state school because someone said he was the first president that went to like a public university or something like that. The Oracle says if Obama didn't know, it's because he didn't want to know. Right? It's a good point. Good point. Okay. We're moving on to our next story here. And this is the interview that Briahna Joy Gray had with Marianne Williamson. There are 2 parts of this interview I want to focus on because this actually is going to lead into the next story, which is the Cornel West hit piece. We're going to get into that. I think we need to start asking some questions in reference to where are we going, right? So I think the mistake that was made after Bernie 2020 is we didn't really ask that question. If we did ask it, we didn't get an answer. And people were just scrambled all over the place. So I think we need to ask the question in reference to those that support these left political positions, which I do. Where are we going? And I'm asking that question because in this first clip here with Bree and Marianne, she's going to ask Marianne a question in reference to who is she going to support if it comes down to Joe Biden, Cornel West, and Donald Trump? Who would you support? And I think people need to hear this. If you haven't seen this interview, I think you need to hear this because this is what worries me. What worries me is this idea that we have people running on progressive policies, but in the end, if they don't win, it's almost like that's it. That's just the end of it. People just cave. Like there's nothing else after that. And I think a lot of us went through that through the Bernie move. Like after Bernie, decided to step down in 2020, he decided to not continue his campaign. There was nothing else in reference to the progressive movement. There was no path. There was no guide. Like nobody knew what to do. And if that's the way it's going to be, if it is going to constantly be, I am going to run on these progressive policies, but if I lose, we just got to go with the establishment, go with the flow, then there's no point of trying to have any type of progressive movement because you can't take that energy and just funnel it into the establishment. And that's what's happening. And that's why, part of the reason why DSA has been moving to the right, the squad have been moving to the right, because that's what's been happening. Let's get into this discussion here.
But given how long we've been waiting to get energy around third-party campaigns and alternatives to the duopoly, I also have a great deal of respect for people who are sort of indifferent to the risk, who are willing to roll the dice, because they aren't willing to sit on their butts for another 4, 8, 16, 24 years when they don't have health care and all of the existential crises that you outline that you're fighting to cure, just because there happens to be a Trump? Because it's just, isn't DeSantis kind of also an existential threat?
So this is a good point. There will always be a Trump. It may not be Donald Trump himself, but there will always be another one. And I think, especially going forward, are you kidding me? There's always going to be one. And if there's always going to be one, then when do you actually build the movement? Not this time. We can't let the Trump win. You got to go ahead and vote for a Democrat establishment. That could happen 10, 20, 30 years. So at some point, when is everyone going to walk away from this system? That's the question that I have. I want you to hear what Marianne's going to say here.
Worse.
And he's a young man.
Mm-hmm.
I was very chagrined to realize how young he was and that he's fully in my dating pool.
Yeah. No, he's a dangerous man. No, but the whole point is that we don't even have to make that choice right now because you have a candidate who represents the things that theoretically leftists say they want, who is running. So, and what happens if this leftist candidate, i.e. myself, does not win the nomination? Or unless maybe some other progressive is going to come in and also runs, whether it's me, whether it's some other progressive. Bobby Kennedy certainly is not a progressive. Right now, it seems to me, shouldn't the effort be, unless you feel just like listen, if people feel, no, I'm not going with it and I'm just going to support Cornel, that's their right. This is America. People should do what's in their own conscience. I would point out, though, that you can support at this point me and Cornel because I'm running as a Democrat and he's not.
But see, so here's the problem. This piece back here, this is something I want to point out.
Cornel, that's their right. This is America. People should do what's in their own conscience. I would point out, though, that you can support at this point me and Cornel because I'm running as a Democrat and he's not.
So here's what I want to say. When she says if people want to support Cornel, that's their right. Here's the problem. We don't need the candidate that is running on the progressive issues, running through the Democratic Party. We don't need that candidate to say, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. We need you to tell voters that they need to then in turn back up the other candidate that is running on the progressive issues. This is very important. This is very important, guys, because we can't have this happen again where Bernie Sanders 2016, that's it, I'm out, vote for Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders 2020, not going to be me again, vote for Joe Biden. You see this, all this does is stall any type of real progressive movement. It gets stalled every time because the person who is running on the progressive policies doesn't want to tell you that you should not support the establishment. So if Marianne doesn't come forward and say, okay, guys, I'm not going to win this. You need to support Cornel West because he is running on Medicare for all. He is running on, canceling the war empire. He is running on the issue about student debt. He is also, like Marianne, running on reparations. That needs to happen. And I feel like people need a leader. People need a leader. They need someone with that voice to say, vote for the candidate that is running on those progressive issues. They need someone to say, do not support Joe Biden because he is continuing the climate catastrophe, okay? They need someone to say that. Yes, he's done some things in reference to legislation, in reference to climate reform, but he's also done some things that he's doing right now. He's drilling. He's still drilling. and putting measures in legislation, approving measures in legislation that still gives Joe Manchin the ability to poison the climate still. So we need someone to say that. And I say this because Bernie Sanders did not say that. He told you to do the opposite both times. In the revolutionary political movement, it dies every time you do that. Let's go on.
Right now, if you do think that there's any hope within the Democratic Party, then I think the conversation should focus on where we are now. There is a Democratic progressive running, and takes us back to that erasure. We're talking theory, when to me, maybe because I am that candidate, I'm like, why? The conversation I would like to see focused on what we can do actually to replace the neoliberal as the Democratic nominee in 2004. Then you're going to have a really interesting campaign. Then let Cornel and me go at it. That'll be fun.
But that's not going to happen. Marianne knows that this is not going to happen. Bebel says, Sabby, we don't need anyone to do anything. We need to demand and keep a movement going. Right. But the problem is, Bebel, is like, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. That's the problem. And we've seen this time and time again. Roger Meadows talks about this a lot. People get excited about doing the work on the outside until the next presidential election comes and there's a candidate that's running on progressive issues. Then all the attention goes to that. And then it's like when that candidate loses, and Marianne will lose, not necessarily because of any fault of her own, but because the DNC is never going to let her win. We all know this. We've been through this multiple times before. So Marianne knows that. She knows that's not going to happen. So why not come forward right now and just say, yes, I will support Cornel West because he is the other candidate that is running on reparations and is running on Medicare for all and is running on dismantling the war empire. Yes. Why not just come forward and say that? Let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you described, the plan to vote for you in the primary, and then should you not win, vote for Cornel. I mean,
I'm not saying to do that, by the way. I'm just saying you have both. Yeah.
But Marianne, I think that if you, again, I'm not trying to, I know that there are implications potentially for access to the debate stage and all those kinds of things for if you clearly don't say, I'm going to vote for the nominee.
That's not what's keeping the DNC from, the DNC's refusal to let us debate at this point has nothing to do with that.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. So at this point, it's like, what is there to lose from saying, look, if I lose, I will be endorsing Cornel West. Like, I would vote for Cornel West.
I don't know if I would. I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know if you would? I hope everyone heard this. I hope everyone is paying attention to this. What do you mean?
At this point, it's like, what is there to lose from saying, look, if I lose, I will be endorsing Cornel West. Like, I would vote for Cornel West.
I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would.
Well, what causes that?
I have the same right as all the other people you're mentioning. Everybody should do what is in their conscience to do.
This is why I call BS, because number one, I know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, I don't know if I would support Cornel West. I mean, if she's telling you that she doesn't know if she's going to support Cornel West, that means that she's considering supporting Joe Biden. And the point that I want to bring home is this. If you believe that we should have Medicare for all, if you believe that we need to fix this issue with student loan debt, if you believe in the economic issues that she's running on, she's complained about the economy a lot, why in turn would you say you don't know if you would vote for Cornel West when he has some of those same things on his platform? Cornel West is actually to the left of Marianne when you look at the war empire. So this to me tells me it's not about the policies. You see, when I voted for Bernie Sanders, I voted for Bernie because of the policies. But if it's really about the policies, then why don't you know if you would support Cornel West? Then that tells me if you're even thinking about considering Joe Biden, then that tells me for Marianne, it's really not about the policies. It's about continuing to stay in and uplift and uphold the Democratic Party. If it's issues with the establishment, if it's issues with the economy, which she's talked about oftentimes, why would you vote for the person who caused those issues and is continuing to do so and is not going to give everybody health care? Said he would veto it. Why would you support that person? If Medicare for all is that important to you, why would you vote for the candidate that is against your own interest? This was painful. This part right here, it was painful to hear. Because it's just like, what do you mean you don't know? Let's go back a little bit. Here we go.
I have the same right as all the other people you're mentioning. Everybody should do what is in their conscience to do. But Marianne,
this is the same argument that people are wielding, that you're saying that in defense of your campaign, that like on the facts of the matter, your policies are more aligned with the Bernie policies, more aligned with progressive policies. So folks should go ahead and vote for you if they are in fact a progressive. If it comes down to Cornel West and Joe Biden, isn't it plain that progressives should vote for Cornel West?
It's plain if you look at it one way, and if you look at it another way, it's not. Life is it's like there are many, many angles of that conversation, and they're difficult. Going back to, I respect where every person lands on that. I respect where every person lands on that. I remember I was living in.
But if you respect where every person lands on that, then why are you running? Why are you running as? Let me let her finish here.
In Michigan in 2000. If Michigan hadn't been Michigan, I would have voted for Ralph Nader. But because Michigan was Michigan, I voted for Gore. And if it had been a state where it didn't matter, I would have voted for Ralph Nader. Every person has to make their own decision.
Ralph Nader, oh my God. Al Gore still lost. And the thing is like, then in other words, what Marianne is telling you is that at the end of the day, she's still going to support the establishment, even though she's telling you to go against the establishment. This is not going anywhere. So I ask this question again. Where are we going? Because if the end result is going to be support this progressive candidate, but when they lose, still support their establishment opponent, then what's the point? JB says because she wasn't really invested in a third party candidate. I mean, how are you supposed to build the third party movement if in turn you just tell everybody, well, you can't get Trump, so vote for Joe Biden? And this will never end. This cycle will constantly repeat itself. I don't get it, man. I'm sorry. I don't get this at all.
Where it didn't matter, I would have voted for Ralph Nader. Every person has to make their own decision. I'm not telling other people how they should vote. What I am saying people should do theoretically who are leftists is to recognize that there is a leftist campaign here.
Yeah, recognize there's a leftist campaign, but then in the end, you're going to want those people to recognize that they need to vote for Joe Biden. Now, here's the second part, another clip that I want to share. This is in reference to Medicare for all. Okay, so listen to this. Because again, this is a big one, right? This is kind of like a litmus test for those who are leftists, right? It's, do you agree that we should have Medicare for all?
You mentioned Medicare for all a little while ago, and I recently talked to Bhaskar Sankara of Jacobin Magazine, founder of Jacobin Magazine, about why it feels like there is less of an emphasis on what was the flagship leftist policy priority in 2020 and 2016?
I don't
Because of what just Marianne just showed you guys. See, this is what I wanted to point out. The reason why that interest isn't there as much anymore is because the person who was leading the movement was a political candidate and was also a politician. That was the person leading the progressive movement. And that person, when they suspended their campaign, they walked away from the movement. So all that energy just kind of died. You know, there was a little resurgence of it again around Force the Vote. But then after that, it just kind of caved. Without Bernie Sanders kind of telling people where to go and how to move, people didn't know what to do. So people just started going all over the place. You know, it's like walking into a dance club and it's that moment where the lights come on and people just scatter. People were all over the place. So I think that how can we expect people to still be that passionate about Medicare for all when the person who was leading that walked away from it? And when Bernie walked away from it, the squad walked away from it, and everybody else just kind of like, well, I guess this is it.
understand the left. I don't understand how the word perseverance doesn't factor in more. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. 18 million Americans cannot afford to fulfill the prescriptions that their doctors give them. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. People are rationing their insulin. 85 million Americans are underinsured or uninsured. People are putting GoFundMe pages on the internet in order to pay for life-saving operations for themselves and their children. How can you just drop this?
Yeah.
How can you just drop this?
It's an interesting psychological pivot.
But Marianne, in a sense, you're kind of dropping it too. If you're telling people that you don't know if you would vote for Cornel West, that's the only other person that has Medicare for all as part of his platform. So in a sense, Marianne is dropping it too. This is what I'm talking about. Like, it's a no-brainer for me. Like, I know what policies I support. Those are the people I will vote for. The policies I support. And it's just, why would I vote for someone who doesn't support that? I don't know, man.
And I've been really trying to understand it, in part because I was so interested in how we got to a place where suddenly you were allowed to care about that, right? Like something I often said about Bernie 2016, when I was, an anonymous human being affected by the movement shift like everybody else, was that it felt like my kind of amorphous personal ideals had never really been validated in a serious mainstream way. But that in the 2016 campaign, suddenly it wasn't unreasonable or crunchy or silly or melodramatic to talk about people who die from a lack of healthcare access or who have been living paycheck to paycheck as a consequence of going through the longest period of time in American history without a minimum wage raise. All of those kinds of things, I mean, they get kind of said in like liberal left circles, but to actually have an expectation that a politician, a presidential candidate would actually be invested in those issues, no matter how popular they were, it felt almost embarrassing. Like, oh gosh, like you actually think that's going to happen, you moron, right? And there was something about 2016 that suddenly made it not just not embarrassing, but the expectation that if you had a heart, you would vote your ideals. And now it almost feels like, because of perhaps Bernie's subsequent losses, people are ashamed again to admit that they ever were fighting for something like that. Or maybe,
does Brie have an autofocus on this camera? I wonder if she has autofocus on. Sometimes, like if you have autofocus on, it'll go in and out like that. It depends on the camera too, but sometimes that'll happen. If there's something behind you that moves, this is why you don't see me. That's why my blinds are never open. Because if I have the blinds open and you see the birds, they fly by, that might mess with the camera. I'm just curious. Anyway.
This is an argument that I floated to Bhaskar. Maybe in the context of the force the vote debate, so many people on the left arguing against the possibility of fighting in that moment for Medicare for all put themselves in a position where they no longer really have the credibility to say it mattered as much. Because if it really did matter that much, then you should have put it all on the line back then in the force the vote moment. I don't know. Have you given that any thought?
What I know is that there is a candidate running for the Democratic nomination, who puts first and foremost in her agenda Medicare for all. All of these things that certain people say they care about, said they cared about, felt one way in 2012, another way in 2016. Is the left going to go for power or not?
But in reference to is the left going to go for power or not, to be fair, Marianne just said she doesn't know if she would vote for the other candidate who has Medicare for all as part of their platform, simply because he's not running through the Democratic Party. And there's this threat of Donald Trump, so to speak, right? So that's not going for power. If you just cave and say, okay, well, we can't get Trump, I'm going to vote for the Democrats, that's not going for power. That's giving your power away to the Democratic Party. And if you continue to give your power away to the Democratic Party, we will never build a significant third party movement in this country. This is very important. I think people need to understand this. I don't know, man.
I mean, none of this other stuff. It's almost like we're sitting here and like trying to psychoanalyze the left rather than just arguing that the left have a spine. And if you do, when you see people either endorsing a president who has said that he would veto Medicare for all, a president who is not standing for a real leftist agenda, it was just kind of moving us slow walking towards maybe someday we will have it. I think the question that I'm most concerned about is not how people felt 4 years ago, but what's happening right now.
But what Marianne says, the left needs to have a spine, but she's not willing to have a spine herself because she's not willing to say whether or not she would vote for the other candidate running on the progressive issues because they are running as a third party candidate. I guess I feel like there's contradiction.
That's what I'm trying to get at, because there's been a shift. It's in many respects the same people. Just like you pointed out that even PodSave and CNN gave you a platform back then, they won't now. The same people have a different approach. Even PodSave, I had John Levitz on the Bernie podcast during the campaign, and even he had to make noises that gestured at the legitimacy of Medicare for all. Now, he argued that Kamala Harris's Medicare for all plan really was a Medicare for all plan, which it obviously wasn't, and we debated it. But even all of the candidates in the race had to at least pretend like they cared and agreed with Bernie in some way on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And today, it's not just that those people are no longer feeling the need to do that. It's that the leftists who purported to care viscerally, to care deeply about that issue, are now in a place where they're like, well, it's not going to happen, and for 20 years anyway. So,
and exactly that goes back to, but there is a candidate who stands for it. That's why when I heard him.
But there's multiple candidates that stand for it. It's not just you, Marianne. Like Cornel West also stands for it. So Marianne's saying that, but when she loses, because she will, and same thing will happen to RFK Jr., the DNC is not going to let them win. She don't even know if she could tell you to vote for the candidate that does support Medicare for all. That's the part that's really weird to me.
Vigeland said, well, I think our candidacy is overrated. This isn't about me personally. This is about the fact that you actually do have a candidate standing for those things. And there's this, I almost get the feeling people are like, yeah, we want those things, but I just wish it wasn't her.
But if they're saying they just wish it wasn't you, it's probably because you sound flip-floppy. You don't sound confident in your position. You don't sound like you are grounded and confident in your position, where you stand, and what are you going to do. It just kind of sounds wishy-washy. And I think that's a big part of the problem. I guess I don't know, man. My advice to all of you is, I guess, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And my thing is like, if we continue the cycle, nothing is ever going to change. Thank you, Roger. Hunter just trying to flex that his dad is VP. Thank you, Matt. If Obama knows about torture, Obama knows what Joe does, and will do, because it affects his legacy. Ooh. Thank you, NK. It's really the same thing that happened with Obama in '08. I remember feeling like we were all ready to hit the streets, but nothing happened. Well, there was Occupy Wall Street. Remember Occupy? Thank you, Dwayne. Best president we've had of the last 4 is Trump. So sad. Thank you, Defund. Keep up the great work, Sabby. JB says, if this is so important, then why not support the only person who supports those policies? That's what I don't understand. Like, exactly. Notori says, Marianne is thinking about the next damn book club. Damn. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Whee! Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Ding, 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 Sab. It is about the party and keeping up the party grift. Sabby, I was thinking today and a feeling of embarrassment came over me. I was thinking back to 2019, that video where they redid Endgame. Thanos, Trump, Bernie, Cap, and AOC was Black Panther with bodyguard squad members stepping through the portal. I remember that. Kyle was on there. Shaka was on there. I wanted to hang my head in shame for being hyped up. And something like that will probably happen again. Something like that will probably happen again where they'll try to get that hype back. Now, speaking of Cornel West, if you guys have not heard, so Cornel West, it's official, has his first hit piece. So yes, the Daily Beast has slapped a hit piece against Cornel West. This is in reference to taxes. So they're claiming that he has unpaid taxes. I don't know what's going on with everybody trying to look at tax stuff this year. It's really interesting to me. They came after Matt Taibbi. Actually, the IRS showed up at Matt Taibbi's house. Really interesting. But yes, first hit piece to Cornel West. It says Cornel West owes more than $500,000 in unpaid taxes. Look at this decline of the West. Boy, I tell you. The presidential candidate has made raising taxes on the rich a fixture of his campaign. He shorted the IRS more than the median salary in 6 of the last 20 years. So here we go. Veteran Ivy League professor and best-selling author Dr. Cornel West has long advocated for taxing the rich to provide more services to America's lower classes. But the academic turned Green Party presidential candidate isn't living up to those standards in his own life. As public records from New Jersey and California show, West owes the IRS hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes. I just want to start off and say, I don't think this is the smear they think it is. And the reason being is because there are a lot of people that owe taxes. You know, next time I interview Cornel West, I'll ask him about this. But there are a lot of people that owe taxes, especially a lot of working class people that owe taxes as well. And the average Joe Schmo going to kind of look at this and be like, oh, I hope they don't come after me or look for me. This really is just not the this really is just like not the thing. Like they tried to use this against Trump, remember? And it didn't matter. Let's go on. West's lament of the concentration of wealth among the nation's elite and his support for fiscal policies that would funnel funds down the social scale have been an enduring theme of his decades-long career as a public intellectual, from his initial appearances on the national scene in the 1990s to his support of both Senator Bernie Sanders' failed presidential bids to his current sally along the 2024 campaign trail. Taxation without representation is now reflected in policies that allow the wealthy to be coddled and undertaxed, while the perennially poor, working poor, and new poor are ignored and rendered invincible. West and co-authored and alleged sex pest Tavis Smiley, they're still saying this about Tavis Smiley. You see this? Wrote in their 2012 book, The Rich and the Rest of Us, Economic justice in America has been overshadowed by greed because unequal taxation benefits the rich at the expense of everyone else. In the recent interview with Semaphore, West maintained that we've got to have taxes that are higher, much higher, while he told the New York Post that first son Hunter Biden now lapsed plea deal to misdemeanor tax charges amounted to a little slap on the wrist, especially compared to the penalties the spawn of less powerful families face. But materials filed in Mercer County, New Jersey, where West owns a home in the upper crust college town of Princeton, and in Los Angeles, the location of his personal attorney's office, reveal a second secret motive to his hugely lucrative professional life, a failure to pay his own taxes. Do you remember when they did this to Wesley Snipes? You guys remember when they came after Wesley Snipes and they said that he didn't pay his taxes? Then come to find out he actually had overpaid, if I remember correctly. These documents show a total of over $543,000 in outstanding federal tax liens against the professor, activist, and writer after repeated emails, calls, and text messages from the Daily Beast to the West campaign, to interim campaign manager Jill Stein, and to West himself. The professor sent a one-line response from his personal Gmail account. My brother, I have asked my accountant to respond to these charges, some of which are not true. So see, this is why I say, like, I can talk to Cornel West about this next time he comes back on. Let me continue. However, correspondence from the accountant was not forthcoming, and West did not respond to the Daily Beast's subsequent request that he provided documentation that contradicts the public records from New Jersey and California. These records show that for all his tirades against the wealthy in almost every one of the years recorded, West owed more in unpaid taxes than the median American household earned. This includes over $85,000 he shortened the IRS in 2017, over $136,000 in 2016, over $82,000 in 2015, over $98,000 in 2014, over $62,000 and over $77,000 way back in 2005. The IRS has not filed a release for any of these liens, meaning they remain open or have only been repaid inside the last 30 days. So if we're going all the way back to 2017, that's how many years ago? Oh, wait, no, they said 2014. They said 2005. Okay, so the fact that the IRS hasn't, released this for any liens or something like that, you can only go so long without paying taxes before the IRS comes for your shit. I'm just keeping it real for you guys. So if they're going all the way back to 2005, wouldn't the IRS have already came for his belongings by now? Just something to think about. Let's continue. It is possible West has entered a payment plan with the IRS and paid some of the outstanding balance on these liens, but neither the candidate nor his campaign made any claim to this effect to the Daily Beast. So what is bothersome to me, and I'll come back to that part. Notice in this article, where is the receipts? That's why I'm like, this kind of seems like a hit piece. Where are the receipts? Where are the receipts with these amounts that they listed here in this article? Let's continue. The county level filings also expose West as a perennial tax delinquent for almost his entire tenure in the public eye. On top of the sums listed above, he piled on over $700,000 in liens in a 6-year period, ending in 2004, a balance he finally paid down in 2010. He also welched on $34,000 tax debt in 2008, which he finally made good on 4 years later. So what? Let me say something here. And I don't even know if this is true, but sometimes when you file taxes and let's say you owe, right? So for me, it's a little bit different. I don't have an accountant. I don't have much. Okay. So I don't need an accountant. I can just do my taxes myself. But for people like Dr. West, they're more likely to have an accountant like handle this stuff. Here's the thing. Sometimes if you owe taxes, you have that option of signing up for the payment plan where you can make a payment each month and get that balance down. And it can take a year. Sometimes it can take more than that. So what I don't understand, why are they crapping on the fact that he paid it off, according to this, that he paid it off? Why is that a problem? You guys see what I'm saying? Who cares if it took a couple years or so to pay it off? It's paid off. So why are they making a big deal out of that? Let's continue. Additionally, documents the IRS submitted in California reveal that West racked up over $46,000 and over $112,000 in tax debt in 2011 and 2012, respectively. The materials from the Los Angeles County Clerk's Office also show West finally resolved these liens on June 14th of this year. Okay, so if it was resolved, then why are you writing about it? This doesn't make any sense. Thank you, Dana. This article is so obviously ridiculous. They don't even have any receipts. New Jersey court records further indicate Harvard and Princeton educated son of the Defense Department contractor is a deadbeat in more ways than one. A $49,000 child support judgment against him from 2003 remains open to this day. Where's the receipts? William Brederman? Guys, don't you always notice when the Gray Zone does these articles and they talk about funds? Haven't you noticed that the Gray Zone always put the receipts in the article? Where's the receipts? But it goes on. It's not even just that. It's not even just that. This piece here from Politico, they're already trying to start the fear mongering. Biden world moves to stave off Cornel West and no labels threat. Democrats fear repeating history from third-party challengers threatening Biden's 2024 bid. It goes on to say here, I just want to read a small part from here. Inside the party, there are bubbling concerns of a repeat from what happened 7 years ago when Green Party candidate Jill Stein drew more votes in 3 critical battleground states than the amount by which Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in those places. Why are they acting like this is the first time in history we've had people run third party for president? Just something to think about. Something to think about. And I'm going to point out something else I've been noticing as well. Operatives are determined to not let it happen again. Cornel West, prominent academic and civil rights leader with the ties to Senator Bernie Sanders, has already launched a bid on the Green Party ticket as Biden looks to fend off that threat on his left. Senator Joe Manchin has flirted with a presidential run with the group No Labels that Democrats fear could deprive Biden of moderate votes. Though the president's reelection team has preached confidence, some Democratic officials and strategists worry that the urgency to vote for Biden has dissipated for some voters since Trump left the White House. They are anxious that young people in particular might be receptive to West's message. And why would that be? Why would some young people be receptive to Cornel West's message? What is he running on that young people actually care about versus what Joe Biden ran on and what Joe Biden's done since he's been in office? It says that younger voters, Democratic primary voters, don't want Biden to be nominated again, in largely part because of his age. Though his aides insist that he is in great shape physically and mentally, he is also 80, the oldest president ever. The third parties can take away enough votes to make Donald Trump win. Third parties don't take away votes. See, that's another thing they don't they totally get that wrong. Not only do you have no labels, but you have Cornel West, which I think is very formidable also in the Black community and among young people. And I think that there were a lot of people, young people, disaffected people who were willing to vote against Trump, anybody but Trump, to beat Trump. But that argument has worn a little thin with some of its disaffected voters in 2024. And why has that happened? Because Joe Biden hasn't delivered. But they want you to just vote for him anyway. You know, like, this is crazy. It's just a hot mess. There was one more part here I wanted to mention. This part right here. Biden's world has been monitoring West and no labels. But those closest to Biden believe that the memory of Stein and the possibility of another Trump presidency will prevent a third party candidate from drawing much support in 2024. I want to point out something. Notice how they never mention Howie Hawkins. Have you guys ever noticed that? You know why? Because Joe Biden won in 2020. They mentioned Jill Stein because Jill Stein ran in 2016 and Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. But I also think they don't mention Howie Hawkins because I really do feel like Howie Hawkins, at the end of the day, he kind of wanted him. Especially when it comes to war, the way that he's been talking in reference to war recently, he's kind of like one of them in a sense. But pay close attention to these things, guys. They never mention him. They never mention Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson's numbers for the Libertarian Party were actually historic. They never mention Gary Johnson. They never say those Gary Johnson voters would have voted for Trump. These are things you got to pay attention to. But they're afraid, and they're more afraid of Cornel West than they are of Marianne and RFK Jr. And I want to explain why. Because Marianne and RFK Jr., when they don't get the super delegates, which we all know how this is going to go, when the DNC tries to cheat again and doesn't give them the super delegates that they need to actually become the Democrat nominee, that means Biden moves on to the general election, and it'll be Biden and either Trump or DeSantis, whatever happens over on that side of the block, and Cornel West. They fear Cornel West more because Cornel West can still stand in the general election. Whereas if Marianne and RFK Jr. lose the Democratic primary, they are no longer in the general election. But Cornel will be. He'll still be there. That's why they're really afraid of Cornel West. Now, unless Marianne or RFK Jr. flip and run independent, which I don't think is going to happen, they're going to have to deal with Cornel West in the general presidential election. And they're scared. They're really scared. They're going to come up with all kinds of stories. So the one that you just heard about the taxes, this is just the beginning. But they need to understand, a lot of people, especially those of us in the Black community, we really don't care about this shit. This is so funny to me when people say, like, oh, so-and-so didn't pay their taxes. The rest of us are just kind of like, man, we don't care. That's not the gotcha that they think it is. People usually care about stuff like that, like the bougie, you know, upper crust. Let's go get brunch on the rooftop and sip the tea with their pinky fingers in the air kind of people. The rest of us don't care about that shit. Okay. Let me go to some of the comments, and then I have something funny for you guys. Oh, do we have the poll? Eric, let me know when we have the poll. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, make sure you hit that like button. If you're a newbie, subscribe if you like what you see. I clicked the wrong one. There we go. Hit that like button. That helps me out with the algo. And let's go ahead and dive into this poll. I'm curious to see what you guys had to say. I'm curious. All right. Which candidate do you feel has the best policies? All right, 926 votes. That's pretty good. Marianne Williamson has 2%. Cornel West has 79%. RFK Jr. has 17%. Joe Biden has 2. Who put Joe Biden? Oh, well, Joe Biden has 2%. So this is something to show people. For everybody thinks that my audience is all one way. They're not. Just look at how people voted. So this goes to show you not everybody that watches me is, for Cornel West, even though I am. Not everybody that watches me is, for Marianne or for Biden or RFK. There's a little bit of a mixture, but it is obvious that most of the people watching me either like Cornel West or RFK Jr. But there's a little bit of a mixture there. I don't know about the Biden one though. I don't know where that came from. Yeah. I think I'm gonna do the bear thing first, Eric. Let me go to the comments first, and I want to tell you guys something about this bear. Thank you for the super sticker, Queen Lioness of Israel. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Dana says IRS can freeze your bank accounts for non-payment of taxes. Those bums. Creative Experiment says, sounds like Cornel just needs to file a few amendments. Not a big deal. You go. Thank you for the super sticker, Leslie. And thank you, Sam. I guess I have to weigh the information in this article about West against the legacy of the man who, 1, voted for and vehemently supported the Iraq War, and 2, was the architect of the crime bill. There you go. Exactly, Sam. There you go. I want to show you guys something fun. Is that okay? Can I show you something fun just for a little bit? And then I'll finish the Tennessee ballot initiatives. There was a bear. By the way, that's my favorite animals. Bear. Okay? Bears. There was a bear who got a little hot and he decided to just go chill in the pool. Now, bears are just adorable. Now, this is from Philip Lewis. I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. He says a bear was caught cooling off in California homeowner's backyard jacuzzi amid a heat wave. Check it out, guys. He's so adorable.
Transmitted copy. Right, all the minutes now.
I don't blame him.
It's hot.
Oh, you guys, give me a grin.
That's how hot it was. It's okay, little guy.
Right, all the minutes.
You know what I noticed in reference to bears? I've noticed over the past couple of years, animals like bears, there was actually a wolf too I saw recently, bears, coyotes, and foxes. Like I've seen more videos and photos of them coming into residential areas. Now, in this particular, incident, I think he was just hot and he just wanted to cool off, right? California has a lot of dry heat, right? So that could have just been the thing. But what I'm saying is I have noticed more videos of those animals venturing into spaces where they're typically residential and there's a lot of people around, whereas they usually would not. And I wonder about that. I don't know. What's that, Mystario? It's because residential areas are coming into their habitat. There you go. Yeah, Nisi said, JB says he looks like me. Oh, a bear. Nisi said, wow, they're getting bold. Yeah, they're getting bold. Someone posted a picture on Facebook of a wolf during the afternoon. Now, this was weird because this was in Massachusetts. We don't see them, right? So they're usually not here. Woburn, Massachusetts, they saw a wolf in their yard and they took a picture of it. So my impression is that there must have been something wrong with him, because they don't usually venture like that, especially during the day. All right, let's go ahead and finish up the Tennessee ballot initiatives because I have 3 more questions for Tennessee and we'll be done with that. Oh, really quick, I have to tell you guys, tomorrow I am going live at 7 p.m. Eastern time instead of 8 because Garland Nixon will be back. So he's coming back on. We have a lot to talk about. So just FYI. All right, going back to Tennessee. All right, this is Amendment 2, Acting Governor Amendment. A yes vote supported amending the state constitution to provide a process along with the line of succession for an acting governor when the governor is unable to perform the office's powers and duties. Who supported this? Mainly Republicans. One of the arguments was, we certainly hope this is something we will never need, but it's necessary to have a plan in place that secures our democracy in such a crisis. Voting yes on Amendment 2 will strengthen our Constitution and our state government by ensuring there is no extended period in Tennessee where it's unclear how executive powers are to be carried out. Well, I guess that's good to know. There was no money spent to support it or oppose it. The next measure is, I know Roger Meadows said, did they not have this before? Yeah, that's kind of weird. You would have thought they would have had like a backup plan. Constitutional Amendment 3, remove slavery as punishment for crime from the Constitution Amendment. A yes vote supported amending the state constitution to remove language that allows the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as criminal punishments and replace it with the statement, slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. That measure passed by 79.53%. It's kind of shocking that that already hasn't been established. I know. I can see some of the comments and some of you guys are like, what the hell? Yeah, it's this past November, Vermont was one of the states that passed a ballot measure to outlaw slavery. So apparently it's not on the books in some places. Isn't this crazy? Who supported this? Democrats, typically. An organization called Human Rights Campaign PAC. Arguments are voting yes on 3 is about righting a wrong. Sorry. We passed Amendment 3 will remove slavery as a punishment from the Constitution of the state of Tennessee. The whole campaign is about common sense and compassion. And this is another element of that campaign. Let's make sure we go out and vote yes on Amendment 3. And opposition, Republicans opposed it. This is crazy. It says Tennessee's Constitution has expressly prohibited slavery since it was first adopted in 1870. So it's unnecessary to add this amendment to the Constitution. It will only confuse Tennessee voters by leading them to believe slavery is allowed under the current Constitution, which it is not. Bruh. Why didn't you guys have this resolved already? There was over $200,000 spent to support it. No money spent to oppose it. And the last one, Roger said 1 of 2 red states, Utah in 2018, and 1 of 4 total that got to the left of a lot of blue states on closing the loophole of the 13th Amendment regarding imprisonment. Yep. Vermont and Oregon, only blue states that closed the loophole. Yeah, that's crazy. It's just crazy that that wasn't taken care of. And the last measure is Constitutional Amendment 3, remove religious minister disqualification amendment. A yes vote supported repealing section 1 of Article 6, I want to say. That's 6. I'm not that great with my Roman numerals. I think that is 6 of the Tennessee Constitution, which stated that religious ministers were disqualified from being elected to the state General Assembly. Why were clergy banned from serving in public office? The practice of prohibiting clergy from serving in public office came from English law to prevent dual office holding, as well as preventing and diminishment of independence of the House of Commons by the Crown, since ministers in England were subject to the powers of the Crown. The practice carried over the United States as 13 states initially established this ban in their constitutions. There was some disagreement among the founding fathers regarding this ban on clergy serving in public office. While some, like Thomas Jefferson, wanted to clearly establish a separation between church and state, others, like James Madison, believed that it violated a fundamental principle of liberty by punishing a religious profession with the privation of a civil right. And so it is ratified by 63.24%. That's interesting. Who supported it? So there was 1 Republican and 2 Democrats who supported it. The argument was, I think, that the clergy are the proper people to serve constituents across the state of Tennessee, because I think they will certainly stick as close to what's right, fair, and equal in all situations. That's interesting. And there was no one that opposed that measure. Interesting. We're almost done with the ballot and initiatives, guys. So I can't believe we're almost done. That's just crazy. Pretty wild, huh? Anywho's, tomorrow, don't forget, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Garland Nixon will be here. We've got some things to talk about in reference to this recent attack from Ukraine on Moscow city. So we're going to talk about that. And a bunch of other stuff. So that's it for me, guys. All right. So you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.